This video is part of a series of interviews with some of the parachute engineers, scientists, and developers who have been responsible for the most significant and advanced parachute systems of the last half-century, and was created by the Aviation Trail Parachute Museum in Dayton, Ohio. In June 2017, at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Forum, Charles Lowry, longtime deceleration researcher and member of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, interviewed Elsa Hennings about her work and accomplishments in the parachute industry.
Well, I'm very pleased to be sitting here with my good friend, longtime friend, Elsa Hennings. And I want you to tell us, though, about your birthplace and where you live now.
Okay, I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, a long time ago, not quite as long ago as you were born, I think, but, and I grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, and then went to college, University of Missouri, and then ended up getting my first job at the Naval Air Warfare Center. It used to be called the Naval Weapons Center, back when I first started working there in 1983.
So your schooling was in Missouri as well?
It was, University of Missouri, Columbia.
You got a bachelor's there in what?
I did, in mechanical engineering.
Okay. Well, tell us how you got into parachutes, Elsa.
Well, while I was at the University of Missouri, a friend of mine asked if I would like to go parachuting, and I said, that sounds like a great idea. So we went parachuting, and I thought it was the best feeling in the world to actually be flying. That was a dream. So of course I didn't tell my parents till after I got done with that I had just gone. So I knew better than that. So I got bit by the bug of parachuting and had a great time with that. When I interviewed for, actually when I filled out my job application for the Navy, they asked for hobbies, and I had down there parachuting and amongst other things. And evidently someone on the interview team saw that and thought, oh, let's hire her. So that's how I ended up going to work out in California at China Lake.
So you were hired as a parachute engineer, huh?
I was hired into the parachute group at
Okay.
China Lake. There really weren't people coming out of school with parachute engineering backgrounds, but they figured, as we still mostly do today, we teach our own, and once we get engineers, we teach them the parachute parts.
Well, then your entire career has been with the Navy, is that correct?
It has. Yep.
At China Lake?
At China Lake, yep.
Tell us about the most best or most notable programs you've worked on and what you did.
There have been several in my career that were amazing, that were very either enlightening, growth opportunities, a lot like that. One of them was the bailout system for the Space Shuttle after Challenger had blown up. They came to the Navy to quickly field a bailout system for the astronauts in case something should happen and there was no landing site available for the shuttle. And so I was involved in that team to develop that system, and fortunately we never had to use it, but it was quite a learning opportunity, and that was the first time that I worked with the NASA team at Johnson Space Center, and since then I've worked with different NASA groups off and on, which has been great.
Tell us about another one.
Let's see, another one that it's kind of interesting because this was a Navy bailout system that we did for the E-2 and the P-3 aircraft, and it was a typical system. It had its ups and downs, but the most amazing thing about that particular program was after we had fielded the system, there was actually an E-2 aircraft that caught fire, and 3 of the crew members were able to successfully bail out. We had heard that had happened and tried to reach out to find those individuals, to find out anything we could learn from that experience. Since bailout systems aren't used very often, it's invaluable to get whatever information you can. So we were unable, though, to find them, make contact with them. However, about 2 years ago, there was a group of Navy officers that had come through China Lake, and I was giving them a little presentation on what we do. And after that presentation, one of the pilots in that group came up and he said, I just want to thank you. And he almost had tears in his eyes. And I kind of looked at him and said, no problem. I give presentations a lot. And he said, no, I want to thank you for saving my life. It was one of the sailors that had bailed out. And while I was giving that pitch, he realized, oh, this is the group that did the system that just saved my life. That was the most meaningful thing that had ever happened.
That's wonderful.
So,
tell us what you're doing right now.
right now, I'm working on, well, actually my job is, I guess you would say the chief engineer for parachutes for the Navy. So I oversee the parachute work that we do for Navy systems, including weapons, ejection seats, bailouts, the special forces, anything that has to slow down. But I'm also doing a lot of work with NASA groups to help out with Orion, for one. That's a big one, the recovery system for that. Also, I'm helping the Jet Propulsion Labs with they're the parachutes that we're looking at for Mars. So that keeps us pretty busy.
It certainly does. Elsa is very much involved with CPAS, or the Orion parachute system, and they rely on her so much for her technical expertise. So I'm on the phone with her for daily sometimes. You already told us about the proudest moment in your life, in your career probably, when you encountered the sailor that used your system to save his life. And are there other highlights that you would like to mention?
During my career, the Orion system has been fantastic to work on in its current. I have been very fortunate to be the person that has been giving guidance in the imagery helicopter during our tests to the camera crew to make sure we get the coverage we need with a system like Orion that has a multitude of parachutes and different things that separate during the conduct of a test. Following the right things is very important. And so early on in the program, I was asked if I would help make sure they got the coverage we needed. So that's worked out great. Fortunately, from that point, when it came to doing the first test, in which EFT-1, in which we went around the Earth twice and the capsule landed in the ocean, they asked the same imagery team to go out and cover that. And so I was part of that group. So that was an amazing opportunity to get to sit in the door of the helicopter with a spacecraft coming down right in front of me. Who gets that? I was just overjoyed to be in that place at that time.
Well, of course.
And I felt very fortunate. So that one's been a fun one to work on.
Think back on your technical challenges. What kind of brick walls have you run into as an engineer in the parachute business? Really tough problems that you had to overcome.
Boy, there's been several, and I've had to struggle a little bit over time, but it seems like we've solved a lot of things. One thing that came up fairly early on was when we had to do a very high pressure pack of a parachute for a target, a Navy target, and in the testing of that system, we realized that even the reefing rings that were on that parachute, at the pressures we were packing this chute to, would squish a stainless steel cutter and cause damage to both the cutter and the rings. So at that point, we realized we had to really figure out something else to do to try to get the metal parts out of a system like that. And that's when we came up with reefing loops. So we switched, that target chute went to reefing loops. It looked kind of like a belt loop. We were able to get all those metal pieces out of there. We no longer had the conflict between reefing rings and cutters, and that worked really well. And since then, we've put those now onto Orion chute, and I believe the other commercial space parachutes have started going that route as well. So I'm happy that that happened. It was when that first happened, it was a mortifying moment of, oh gosh, now what do we do? But it all came out okay once we figured out another way to do
Great.
it.
Tell me what people you most enjoyed working with, and who do you most admire in the business?
Boy, I've worked with a lot of people for a lot of years, and it's hard to really narrow it down. I think I was fortunate to get to work with Theo Knacke early on. He was my mentor when I first started in this business, and I think he stands above all others in his willingness to work with some young whippersnapper girl that, you know, what's the likelihood she's going to keep working? She might just leave and have babies, and, you know, I don't want to invest time in people like that, but he did. And he was patient. He was always accepting of my crazy ideas that I would suggest, and he would let me know whether it's likely to work or not. So he was by far the most I think supportive person that kind of made me who I am in this field.
Theo Knacke is, of course, the grandfather of so much of what we do in terms of the technology of parachutes. And this conference where we are will be awarding Elsa the Theo Knacke Award. It's only awarded to the top parachute engineer in the business that's chosen by a committee of people that know, and she will receive that tonight. Congratulations
Thank
to you. You mentioned that how Knacke saw you as a young lady, as being a lady in the business of parachutes. Has that ever been a factor?
It has, and actually, it's interesting that we're talking also about Dave Gold and his collection, because he was our parachute expert at China Lake when I first started there, and he was a great guy to work with. Kind of different, kind of eccentric. I don't know if you worked with Dave. You remember Dave, a neat guy. However, we also had two other young male engineers that came to work the same time I did. And so, as unfortunately the government does, we have a lot of young people and only a few seasoned veterans to help teach them the ropes. And so in that case, Dave focused a whole lot more time with the other two young men than with me, because, and I found out much later, that was kind of his thoughts was, I'm probably not going to stay around. He did spend some time, but and that's kind of why I latched onto Theo Knacke when he started coming to China Lake to write his design guide. So I kind of felt like I needed to make my own path. And so, in so doing, I think that made me a stronger person, maybe, to say, you know what, I want to do this work. I feel strongly about it. I really like it, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And at that time, it was walk around, find out what other people are doing, ask, hey, can I help? Can you teach me? And that's kind of how I've maybe operated the rest of my life.
Tell me again what year you entered the business in China Lake.
1983.
Okay, since that time, think back. How are things done in parachute engineering today versus how were they done when you first walked in?
I would say right now we utilize computers way more than we ever did, because back in those days we didn't have a lot of computer capability or computer expertise. So we did a lot of things the old-fashioned way, and nowadays we have a lot more computing capability, so we rely on it a lot. I sometimes worry that maybe we over-rely on it, and we look at the pretty pictures that we get with flow generation and CFD and FSI simulations, and convince ourselves that's real, where sometimes you have to go out and test stuff, because that really is real. So I'm hoping that even though the pendulum has swung way over to the computer modeling for a necessity because of the cost of doing testing, I'm hopeful that management and the people that have the money to do these things understand that is not the end all. It has to come back to the center and make sure you validate what you're doing. But that's a big difference. That's one of the biggest differences I see.
Tell me, what kind of breakthroughs would you like to see happen in the parachute business, or you would expect to happen even?
I think one of the things we are heading towards right now, with some different types of fabric and different textiles or non-textile components that we can make parachutes from, such as scrim, which is plastic-covered reinforced material. That's kind of a big deal. I think if we can get to there. So there's a lot of just the materials we use, I think, is having some changes in that will help a lot.
How will that help the industry?
For one thing, it changes a lot. The helping part, the weight savings is enormous. And when you have aircraft and spacecraft that have to carry this thing with them on every flight, if you can cut the weight in half or even a third, you've now made way for more payload, more fuel. There's a lot of benefits you can have just by lightening a system, and that's a big change. There's also changes in designs that I can envision coming forward that, as we've learned some in the conference this week, can help bridge the gap between some really inexpensive but not very accurate payload delivery versus very expensive and accurate, and find something in the middle that has a whole lot more potential to be the 90% solution.
Okay, tell us, Elsa, what lessons stand out in your mind that your work life has taught you? Work life.
I would say, and this is actually a little funny story,
Okay.
that happened when we first started working on the Mars Pathfinder program for JPL. This was our first time we'd worked for JPL at China Lake on parachute projects, and we had a test in which we had to separate a lot of things, and one of the things we had a problem that happened, and it was my fault, and I had inadvertently rigged something that didn't work well. So we ended up reefing a 54-foot chute all the way to the ground and smashing the payload to bits in front of our brand new customer. So that was not feeling so good. But when I figured out, as I'm watching it plummet, I figured what probably was what had happened. And I, after the test, drove over to where the rest of the equipment was so I could verify, and sure enough, it was exactly what I thought. When I went into the room to explain to everybody what had happened and what the solution was, they were surprised. And I think the environment that a lot of the people from JPL that had come to us for this program were a little more reluctant to wave their hand up in the air and say it was my fault. That was kind of unusual. So I think that took them back a little bit. But working for the government, we must always do the right thing. And one of the things that a program manager had told me was, bad news doesn't get better with age. Just bring it up right now and we can deal with it. Be truthful, and you can get this stuff done. So that one was kind of a moment in which I realized, I like working for the government because I feel like I can always be totally honest, even if they say, okay, we're not coming back to you. It's like, okay, that's fine. That's your decision. But that was, I'm not sure if I answered that.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Very well.
All right.
Tell us about your immediate family.
Immediate family, my husband, George, is a rocket scientist. Basically, he's a fuse expert for the government.
At China Lake?
At China Lake, yep. So, I like to joke around that he tries to kill people and I try to save them. But, so we're balanced. And I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter is mentally handicapped. My middle daughter is a lawyer. My youngest daughter is an accountant. I have a wonderful family that's been totally supportive of me and my crazy career, which is why I've gotten to this point.
Well, let me ask you then, tracking the previous question, what is the biggest non-work lessons that life has taught you, non-work?
I think that it's probably as I had mentioned, my oldest daughter was born with brain damage, and with going through all of my adult life, dealing with a child that has special needs, and my other children, feeling guilty that we couldn't go to Disneyland because we can't because of your sister, and worrying about how they would develop. I think all in all, my kids have developed amazingly well, and I think maybe it was because of that. I think being in an environment all my adult life now in which it's obvious everybody doesn't start with the same skill set. We're not all gifted with the same things. Sometimes life deals you a hand, maybe it's a 2, a queen, a 3, a 4, and a jack. And you look at that hand and you say, rats, this is never going to amount to anything. But you get to the end of the road, and you realize 2s, queens, 4s, 3s, and jacks were all wild. And you got a killer hand that you didn't realize. And that whole process has taught me, as well as the rest of my family, how important it is to be tolerant, patient, maybe look beyond what's on the surface to see, who are you on the inside. And I think that's made us very, very strong, and that's
well, of course,
affected me.
It's wonderful. Tell me one last question. What would you advise a young engineer coming into the industry like you did all those years ago? Today, a young engineer's coming in. What would you advise them?
I would make sure they understand the importance of family. I don't ever run into colleagues who say, boy, I wish I had to spend more time at work. It's never that way. To make sure you live a balanced life, I actually worked part-time almost my entire career. From the time my first child was born 29 years ago up until my last child got her driver's license, which wasn't that long ago, I worked part-time. I am happy that I did that, even though maybe I could have done different things with my career. But I think encouraging people to focus on not just their job, spend some time in the community, and you will definitely round you out much better than just living for work.
You're involved with the school board.
I am. I'm the president of a school board for a charter school, which takes some time, but it's fascinating for me to see and to help influence kids, the little ones. This is a K through 8 school, so the little kids come in and to help realize where they're coming from, which is different than how we grew up, but also help to make them realize how important it is to, if you have the skills, to go into a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, math, do it. It's very rewarding. Here's the amazing stuff I get to do. So I try to influence them to just keep going. It's hard. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but if you've got the talent, just keep doing it.
Congratulations on your award this evening. We'll be there on the front row cheering for you.
Okay, thank you.
The Aviation Trail Parachute Museum in Dayton, Ohio, tells the story of the development of the freefall parachute from its invention at Dayton's McCook Field after World War I, through the vital role the parachute plays today in the decelerator industry and safely landing spacecraft. The museum includes interactive exhibits, artifacts, historic photographs, and films. Aviation Trail Incorporated has developed a self-guided tour of select aviation-related sites that are open to the public in the Dayton area. Aviation Trail's mission is to preserve and promote the Dayton area's unique aviation heritage, beginning with the invention of the airplane by Wilbur and Orville Wright. Find out more at aviationtrailinc.org.